In the peaceful, tree-lined suburbs of Hartford, Connecticut, an invisible storm was building. Soon it would tear apart Sarah Callahan's perfect-looking life, leaving nothing but wreckage in its path. To everyone around her, Sarah had it all. A successful marketing executive, living in a charming neighborhood, married to David Thompson, a top-notch management consultant. Together, they were Hartford's power couple, the ones everyone admired, the ones who always seemed to have it together. Even when they faced heartbreak from infertility struggles, they stayed strong, the perfect team. But lately, something felt wrong. At first, it was so subtle, Sarah almost ignored it. David's eyes would drift away, his mind somewhere distant, his warmth replaced by an eerie, guarded look. A chill crept through their home, making the familiar feel strange and uncertain, as though something dark was lurking in the corners. Then came their 10th wedding anniversary, a day he'd always celebrated. This year, nothing, no flowers, no dinner. It was like the day, and she meant nothing. Why? The question haunted her. She couldn't let it go. What could be powerful enough to make him forget? Sarah tried to brush it off, but each time she did, that unsettling feeling grew stronger. It followed her, shadowing her through every room, making her feel like an outsider in her own home. It was like her once bright life was slipping away right before her eyes. Little did she know, this feeling, this darkness closing in, was just the beginning. A nightmare was about to unfold, worse than anything she'd ever imagined. One evening, while getting the house ready for a dinner party, Sarah found herself alone in their bedroom, tidying up. She reached up to place some extra linens in the closet, her fingers brushing against something unexpected, a shoebox shoved back on a high shelf, almost hidden. She'd never noticed it before. A chill ran through her as she pulled the box down, her fingers trembling with a mix of curiosity and dread. What was inside? Slowly, she lifted the lid, and her world shattered. Inside lay a disturbing mess of secrets that felt like a punch to the gut. A second cell phone she'd never seen. Handmade cards scribbled with messages like, "Happy birthday, Daddy," and photos. David's face smiling with another woman, his arm around two young kids who had his exact features. Her heart pounded as her mind fought to deny what she was seeing. Questions crashed over her like waves, each darker than the last. Who were these children? Who was this woman? How long had David been hiding this second life from her? Her hands shook as she flipped through the photos, each one more devastating than the last. This wasn't just an affair. This was a life meticulously hidden, a dark reality lurking just beyond her reach. In that moment, everything she believed about her marriage lay in ruins. The perfect life she thought she had was a lie. And as she stared down at the proof of David's betrayal, a terrifying thought took hold. This discovery was only the beginning of the nightmare waiting for her. Sarah's once perfect world, built on trust and love, was now a twisted nightmare, unraveling piece by piece. Her mind was reeling, but she knew one thing. She couldn't confront David, not yet. She needed answers, and she would get them, no matter what secrets lay hidden. Day by day, Sarah became a detective in her own home. She tore through emails, bank records, every hidden corner where a clue might lurk. With each discovery, it was as if the ground beneath her crumbled more. She found secret accounts, shadowy transactions, unexplained payments to Columbus, Ohio, a place she'd never set foot in. But David, it seemed, knew it well. Then she found a name: Jennifer Lawrence, a nurse in Columbus. Sarah's heart pounded as the horrifying truth came into focus. Jennifer wasn't just a fling. She was David's other partner, the mother of his two young children. He hadn't just had an affair. He'd built a second family behind her back. Every detail was another dagger. David had siphoned money from their accounts, covered his tracks, made sure she'd never know. The scale of his betrayal was staggering, each revelation cutting deeper, leaving her breathless with shock. Her marriage, her trust, her future, all of it had been an illusion. And as Sarah faced this brutal reality, only questions and a creeping terror remained. Because this nightmare was far from over. David's threats echoed in Sarah's mind, every word a dark warning. She knew now, one wrong move, and everything could fall apart. Her safety and her future hung by a thread. The betrayal had gutted her, but anger burned through the pain. She couldn't hold back anymore. When David walked through the door, she was waiting, armed with every piece of evidence she'd uncovered. One by one, she laid it all out. The hidden phone, the photos, the secret bank records. Her voice trembled, but her gaze stayed locked on him, demanding answers. But David's reaction was ice cold. His eyes stayed flat, his expression chillingly calm, as though they were discussing nothing more than a grocery list. He admitted everything, his need for 2 lives, 2 families, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. But when she mentioned involving the authorities, something shifted. His eyes turned to steel, his voice dropped to a low, menacing threat. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The deadly look in his eyes said it all. If she dared to expose him, there would be consequences. In that instant, Sarah saw the truth. This wasn't just a man with secrets. This was someone dangerous, someone willing to do whatever it took to protect his lies. Her heart raced as the terrifying reality sank in. She wasn't just betrayed, she was trapped, locked in a life she no longer recognized, across from a man she no longer knew. David's threats hung in the air, a dark promise of what he was capable of if she made one wrong move. Her world had already been torn apart, but now her very safety was in danger. She was in a deadly game with a man who would stop at nothing to keep his secrets buried. But Detective Lawson would soon realize that David's lies went far beyond his marriage. The confrontation had left Sarah shaken to the core, feeling as if the ground had been ripped out from under her. David remained disturbingly calm, slipping between his 2 lives as though her accusations meant nothing. Days passed and then, like a ghost, he disappeared. No goodbye, no explanation. Just gone. As hours turned into days, Sarah's anger twisted into confusion, then pure dread. Out of nowhere, strange, cryptic messages appeared in their shared email. Brief notes about space and needing time. This wasn't the David she knew, the David who controlled every inch of his life. This was something different, something unhinged, as though he was spiraling beyond anyone's reach. Desperate, Sarah called his sister Emma, hoping for answers. But Emma was just as shocked, her voice trembling with fear, as she urged Sarah to go to the police. Suddenly, David's secrets felt heavier, darker, like a shadow suffocating everything Sarah once believed in. Detective Michael Lawson took the case, a man known for digging until every last lie was exposed. From the start, he sensed this wasn't just a family dispute. Each new discovery cast a chill down his spine. David's lies weren't just deep, they were disturbingly dark, twisting into something that threatened everyone close to him. With every piece of evidence Lawson uncovered, a horrifying truth began to emerge. David wasn't simply leading a double life. He was tangled in something far more dangerous. Sarah felt it, a sinister presence closing in, a darkness lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. Whatever David had hidden, it wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was a threat, a ticking clock, and Sarah was caught in its countdown. David's deception wasn't just personal, it was a sprawling network of betrayal, a life crafted entirely from lies. Detective Lawson's investigation peeled back the layers, revealing a shocking reality. David wasn't just a man with a double life. He was the mastermind of a ruthless financial empire built on manipulation and deceit. Each new discovery hit like a punch to the gut. David's scheme wasn't some small con. It was a merciless operation targeting the people who trusted him most. There was an elderly couple in Hartford, robbed of their life savings. A single mother in Columbus, lured by David's empty promises, investing her child's entire future. Every story was a fresh wound, revealing just how deeply he had sunk his claws into the lives around him. As the truth spread, both communities erupted in anger and disbelief. Friends, family, clients, everyone who had ever trusted him now stood on the edge of ruin. The polished consultant, the devoted family man, it was all a mask. Beneath it lay a man willing to destroy anyone to satisfy his own twisted ambitions. Detective Lawson knew that David's time was running out. The walls were closing in, his lies turning against him with relentless speed. And as the dark truth continued to unravel, one thing became terrifyingly clear. David's betrayal was only the beginning of a far darker story, one that no one saw coming, and that could drag everyone down with him. As the community wrestled with the shock of David's double life, even darker truths waited, ready to claw their way into the light. The investigation took a horrifying turn when David's car was found, abandoned at the airport, a cold, eerie reminder of his sudden disappearance. Inside, his phone lay forgotten, and next to it, a note, a few haunting lines of broken sentences that hinted at regret and desperation. Each word seemed to echo with finality, as if he'd left a piece of himself behind. But one question loomed, chilling everyone who read it. Where was David? His belongings were there, yet he himself had vanished, leaving behind nothing but shadows and doubts that only seemed to grow. Whispers rippled through the community, theories spreading like wildfire. Some believed he'd run, fleeing justice. Others speculated that something far darker was at play. For Sarah, every new detail felt like a fresh betrayal, deepening the hollow ache inside her. And for Jennifer, the horror was only beginning to hit. She had trusted him, built a life with him, only to be left with nothing but fragments of the lies he'd crafted so perfectly. As neighbors mourned the man they thought they knew, a darker realization set in. The life they'd believed in was only a mask. Underneath was a darkness that was only just starting to show. Just when it seemed the nightmare couldn't go any deeper, new, even more disturbing secrets started to surface, peeling back the last layers of illusion. Now everyone was left wondering, was this truly the end of David's twisted legacy, or had they only scratched the surface of something even more terrifying? Everyone who knew too much seemed marked for danger. Just as the community was beginning to unravel the twisted layers of David's hidden life, a chilling event brought everything to a halt. Simon Reeves, David's former colleague, one of the few who had dared to openly question David's shadowy business practices, was found dead. But this wasn't just a tragic accident. A lethal dose of sedative was discovered in his system, leaving no doubt. Simon hadn't been taken by chance. He had been silenced. Detective Lawson's team was alarmed, but for Sarah, the fear was personal and paralyzing. David's lies weren't just reckless, they were deadly, pulling anyone remotely connected to him into a web of lethal consequences. The walls of her life seemed to close in as the horrifying truth settled in. Each night, she would double-check every lock, her fingers trembling as she glanced over her shoulder, haunted by the feeling that something or someone was lurking in the shadows, watching her every move. Simon's death was more than a tragedy. It was a message, a dark, twisted warning to anyone trying to unearth David's secrets. Sarah felt trapped, knowing every step she took toward the truth was a step closer to a terrifying unknown. It wasn't just her trust that had been betrayed. Her very life now felt like it hung by a thread, suspended over an abyss of danger. David's web of lies had left her with one certainty. Anyone who tried to uncover them risked being destroyed. The line between betrayal and terror had blurred into something deadly. Emma, David's sister, had been Sarah's last anchor, her only ally in a world unraveling. But when Emma was found viciously murdered in her own home, it was a warning too brutal to ignore. Her life had been snatched away in the place where she should have been safe. Her belongings lay scattered across the floor, signs of a struggle that only deepened the horror. Emma was silenced, her fate a stark message. Asking questions had deadly consequences. With Emma's death, everything shifted. The FBI was called in and soon uncovered a terrifying truth. David's betrayals went far beyond family. His life was woven into a vast, lethal network, laundering money for people who would do anything, hurt anyone, to keep their secrets buried. David wasn't just a liar. He'd led everyone close to him into a deadly trap. Sarah wasn't merely betrayed, she was ensnared in a nightmare, hunted for the secrets she had stumbled upon. Every day now felt like a countdown. Threats began to seep into her life, cryptic messages left in her inbox, veiled in a language that only intensified her fear. Strangers lingered outside her home, eyes fixed on her windows, shadows she could feel watching. Her once safe world had become a cage, each lock and bolt a flimsy barrier against the danger lurking outside. Sarah felt her breath catch each time her phone rang, her pulse thundering as if her own body sensed the invisible noose tightening. What started as betrayal had spiraled into a living nightmare. With each new secret the FBI uncovered, Sarah could feel her world crumbling. The lies and deceptions weren't just tearing her life apart. They were becoming chains she couldn't escape, pulling her deeper into a darkness that seemed intent on consuming her whole. Now she was left wondering, could she survive the secrets that had destroyed everyone else? Or was her own fate already sealed? With each new piece of evidence, the full extent of David's betrayal emerged. Out in the depths of a dense, isolated forest, a lone hiker stumbled upon something unexpected: an old, weather-beaten cabin. Inside, under a layer of dust, lay a single laptop, hidden beneath a worn blanket. But this wasn't just any laptop. It was Emma's, the very one she'd been using to gather evidence against David. Now it was here, in the middle of nowhere, like a breadcrumb left in a deadly game. The FBI wasted no time, securing the device with the urgency of a team that knew they were stepping into something far more dangerous. The files within revealed a world of secrets, each one darker than the last. Encrypted documents, shadowy offshore transactions, and a list of names linked to powerful, faceless figures who'd stop at nothing to stay hidden. Emma had been tracking something monstrous, a network of criminals who thrived in the shadows, using David's schemes as a cover for far worse. But the revelations weren't just a breakthrough, they were a warning. With each document decrypted, each name exposed, Sarah's dread intensified. She wasn't merely entangled in her husband's lies. She was now a target, a witness to secrets that should have stayed buried. And with every piece of evidence, it became clear: whoever had taken Emma's life wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone else who got too close. The clock was ticking, and Sarah realized that the next move could be her last. The man who had lived 2 lives left nothing but devastation in his wake. Just when Sarah thought David was a ghost of the past, her phone lit up with a message she could hardly believe. It was him. The words were cryptic, filled with regret, maybe even fear, but underneath them, Sarah sensed a sinister desperation. Against her instincts, she agreed to meet, driven by a need for answers, yet haunted by a feeling of dread that clawed at her stomach. They met in an isolated, dimly lit parking lot. The shadows seemed alive, pressing in, thick with an almost menacing silence. When David finally stepped into view, he looked hollow, a shell of the man he once was. His eyes darted around, seeing enemies in every shadow, his charming mask shattered and replaced by fear. As he spoke, each word was like a puzzle piece, hinting at dark truths but never giving the full picture. He claimed his double life was survival, an escape from threats he couldn't control. But Sarah wasn't convinced. She felt he was still hiding something darker. Then out of nowhere, the red and blue lights sliced through the night. Sirens wailed, each pulse of sound louder, closer, like a countdown toward something inevitable. David's face contorted in panic. He bolted, desperate to escape the walls closing in. In a frantic last act, he tried to take control in the only way he knew, by ending it all himself. But fate wasn't done with him yet. His attempt failed, leaving him trapped between life and death, his body in a coma, his secrets entombed with him. The man who had once promised love and dreams had instead unleashed destruction on everyone close to him. His lies and crimes left scars, and even as he lay silent and still, the ripples of his actions continued, forever marking those who had trusted him. What would you do if your partner was hiding a life you never imagined? As David lay comatose, his final secrets buried within, the chaos he created only deepened. Evidence from Emma's laptop allowed the FBI to tear apart his criminal empire, piece by piece. The revelations hit like a thunderstorm, crashing down on the communities that had once trusted him. David wasn't just a liar, he was a destroyer, and the lives he shattered would never fully heal. For Sarah and Jennifer, healing felt like an impossible mountain, each step lined with jagged edges of memories they couldn't shake. Sarah, haunted by David's shadow, left Hartford, hoping that distance would silence the ghost he'd left behind. But even as she settled into her new town, dread clung to her, heavy and inescapable. Every night the floorboards creaked, a sharp, bone-chilling sound slicing through the silence. And each time her heart raced, wondering if the nightmare had truly ended, or was simply lying dormant. Jennifer stayed in Ohio, determined to rebuild a life for her children, yet feeling as though she balanced on a knife's edge. She fought every day, fierce and resolute, determined to shield her children from their father's dark legacy. But a chilling question lingered. How do you protect them from a past that clings like a curse? With every shadow on the wall, every unfamiliar face in the street, Jennifer's resolve was tested, her motherly instincts at war with the fear that David's past would someday find them. In Hartford and Columbus, trust was shattered like glass. Neighbors, colleagues, friends, all felt the ripple effects of David's deception. The knowledge that a charming smile could hide a monstrous secret left scars, and people began questioning even their closest bonds, wondering if they, too, could be so easily deceived. Relationships were strained, friendships tested, as if everyone was holding their breath, wary of unseen betrayals. As Sarah stood on the threshold of her new life, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. David's world might still linger, remnants of his lies hidden like landmines, waiting to explode. Each silent night, each creak of the floorboards, every flicker of shadow outside her window sent a shiver down her spine, as if a piece of him was still there, haunting her. What would you do if the person you trusted most turned out to be a stranger, and that stranger left a dangerous legacy? If you found this story of betrayal and hidden lives as unsettling as we did, don't forget to subscribe. Click the video on your screen to uncover more chilling tales of secrets lurking behind closed doors.